friends. Welcome back to the Recover Your Life podcast. My name is Bridget, and today's episode is going to be a blast with my friends, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill. Welcome, friends.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
welcome. I know we've talked about this for so long and we're
I love
finally
it.
able to make it happen.
Mm.
So, wow. Thank you, Bridget, for having us.
Yes, so excited. So, my friends have heard about connection codes because I talk about it everywhere. I even had a friend visit from out of town and she goes, "You're even telling our Uber driver about connection codes?" And I said, "Yes, I am. Everybody has to know." So I have,
Only humans, though.
yes.
Only
Well,
humans.
I've tried to tell everybody. I've tried to tell dogs, cats, whoever will listen.
Yeah, it's limited success with
Uh,
other species.
Yes. So Dr. Glenn and Phyllis are the founders of the Connection Codes, and it is the science for human connection, how we all connect. And so, like I said, everyone's heard a little bit about my story of finding your book on a coworker's desk, which I stole. And I asked for it and I took it and I started taking notes in it, and it radically changed my life. Even as someone who had a background in understanding emotional health, this was different. This was super simple. This was a tool that helped me through a really dark, deep season of pain where I wondered if my brain would ever feel back to normal again. And so it has changed my life, and I have loved living life with you guys for the last year and getting able to see this in person and what this looks like, that you guys are the real deal. And so excited for our conversation. So as we jump in, would you just kind of tell our listeners, if they haven't heard me talk about it before, what are the connection codes and how do we use it?
Well, that alone is the whole story, right? As far as connection codes are just, it's like tools that help us understand the human condition and what connects us, what disconnects us. And yeah, it grew out of our story. It grew out of the pain that we were living in, but a ton of research went into it. And I know for me, I did not understand emotion. I didn't understand that emotion happens to you. I really thought I could opt out, which I would say kind of in a very, probably with a lot of pride behind it, just that, yeah, I don't do emotion. Glenn has enough for both of us. I said that over and over for many years and learned the hard way that actually my brain houses emotion as well, and that they are to be our messengers. They're to be our guides. And I didn't grow up understanding that at all. And so the connection codes is just that, understanding the human condition, understanding the science behind it, understanding the way we were created, understanding our brains, taking the judgment out of emotion. We simplify the tools because I needed that. I requested that from all the research Glenn was doing. I kept going back to, can you simplify that? Can you narrow, kind of give me some words that I can understand, not all the scientific jargon. And how can I use this in my everyday life? How can I use this to connect with you and to connect with others? And so that is what it really, I guess, in a nutshell, the connection codes is just that, the simple way to understand emotion and to have the tools to use emotion in a really great way. We can use emotions as weapons, and we want to take that out of your life, is to not use them as weapons, but to use them as a communicator of needs.
Yeah, and part of the power and the beauty of the connection codes is it's the human condition. It's so simple. We've had two families staying with us this past week, and each of them has about a 8 or 10-month-old. And just watching these little ones, they know how to human. When nobody had to teach them, it's already coded inside of them. They already do this. Somewhere along the way, most of us get messed up. We get knocked off course. We get reprogrammed, but we never get recoded. And the beauty of the connection codes is we're just reactivating what's already inside of you. You don't have to go off and learn Latin to be able to do this. You don't have to be able to quote the periodic table. You simply need to be able to relax. And a lot of times people go, "Oh, I just have to try harder." No. You need to try less. You need to relax into yourself. It's already happening. It's already there. And, as Phyllis mentioned, she just thought she could opt out of emotion. And so for literally decades of her life, she was resisting, pushing away, suppressing, ignoring, denying emotion. Those emotions were still there. She was just resisting them. And now she's actually able to relax into her authentic self And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm discovering this woman shockingly, I mean, so fantastic, continually. And I've probably learned more about her in the last 2 years than I have all the other years put together. We've been together for 45 years. And we're so passionate about the connection codes now because we get to live this, and we're startled that this is even possible, but it's less doable, and we just love it. It's really cool.
That's amazing. So we talk about the core emotion wheel in connection codes, which again, I love the simplicity of it. It's our 8 core emotions. So can we spend some time talking about what those 8 core emotions are and what messages that they bring with them?
Yeah, when we started out doing the research on this, I didn't know, I didn't claim to know. I'd been through a ton of schooling,
Yeah.
and was very frustrated with how ineffective the vast majority of the schooling was. So I just kind of started with a blank sheet of paper, and it wasn't too long before I realized, okay, humans connect through emotions. Okay, well, if that's true, then what the heck are these emotions? So then the research led to realizing we have 5 neural regions, 5 regions in the brain that house, or the central command center of emotions. Emotions occur throughout the body, but the limbic system is the central command center. That's true for every human on the planet. That stunned me a bit. I was like, wait, what? This is true for everybody. And it's just like oxygen. Every human breathes oxygen. There are no humans that breathe ice cream or sawdust. It's just oxygen. So to realize this is the human condition. So the 5 regions are anger, fear, anger, fear, disgust. It's amazing. I can't name these. Pain and pleasure. Thank you very much. There's
Great
5 of
team.
them. Such a long list. How could I possibly memorize it? And I've only done this a few thousand times. But then in those 5 regions are 8 core emotions. We divide the disgust region into shame and guilt. We divide the emotional pain into hurt, sad, and lonely. All 3 are pain experiences. They just look very different on a brain scan, and we experience them differently. Hurt, which is a sharp stabbing pain, feels very different than loneliness, but they both fire in the pain region of the brain. So when we boil it down to this, and what we began seeing was that humans connect through core emotions, not secondary, tertiary emotions. So if somebody says, I feel overwhelmed, they're going to have to process through that and get it down to the core emotion before they'll connect through it. And it's different for different people, but we get it down to the 8 core emotions, and that's where humans actually connect. And what the research eventually showed was that if I say to Bridget, I feel sad about this, whatever this is, it actually activates sadness in Bridget's brain. And so now it becomes a shared human experience, and we connect through that. And Bridget's typically going to experience the sadness on a lesser level than what I'm experiencing it, but it tickles her brain the same way, and it becomes mirrored for us, and we just bond through that. And that part of the beauty and power of the connection codes is that now, because I experience sadness, we're more connected.
Yeah.
So that's actually a benefit. And I don't want to go around trying to hurt people on purpose. But if Phyllis feels hurt by me and she processes it, we're more bonded 30 seconds later than we were 30 seconds before, which is just stunning.
It amazes me every single time. Like, I think that's, for me, one of the best parts of just my own connection code journey is every single time I'm amazed that it works. I'm amazed by how well I know myself. Like, even this morning I was talking to someone new, and they were sharing like their core emotions, not even knowing connection codes. And I just was like, oh my gosh, my heart is so with you. I want to be close to you. I want to support you. And it's amazing to me, like when I'm around connection coders, not that doesn't happen, it still happens, but it's kind of more normal. But when I'm with a stranger and it's like, okay, because again, my body's asking that question, is this person going to be safe for me? Are they going to regard me? And so to have a new person, I was like, you did an incredible job processing your emotions. Like, I'm so excited to learn you, which is so great. So I think when processing emotions, I think for me, one of the big things that has been so transformative to my life, even the last couple months, has been the idea of the messages of emotions. And for loneliness showing up in our bodies as chronic pain has been really important in my story. Even this last week, I've had my body show some symptoms that it hasn't shown in a while. And so I kind of dialed in and even asking, some of our foundational questions of, hey, what's happening in my body? What do I need? And I think before, where I felt like the chronic pain was my body failing me some way. It was like, okay, I must just not be good enough at processing my emotions. This is why this pain's showing up. That now I feel so grateful that my body is saying, hey, we need some help here. And tuning in to go, oh, I'm feeling unsupported. I'm feeling lonely and unpartnered, and it's showing up in my body as pain. Well, how can I create partnership?
Yeah.
And it has, like, literally this week, there were 2 days where I was like, okay, wait a second. Like, we're not going to resist this pain. We're actually going to dial in and say, what do you need? How can I support you? And for me, that is the power of connection codes is, yes, it connects us to other people, but the ability to understand, you guys talked about a little bit about that, of like understanding ourselves better and having a better relationship with who we are. And we can live our whole lives and not really know what's happening inside of us. We just kind of live on autopilot.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
so true. And we're pilgrims on this journey too. So even like Glenn mentioned a minute ago that he's learned so much about me in the last 2 years. Well, it's because I've learned so much
Mm-hmm.
about
Yeah.
me in the last 2 years and have been able to share that with him. And, it is a fascinating journey as far as I always say to people, when you learn the basic tools of the connection codes, which is understanding emotion,
Mm-hmm.
understanding emotion happens to you, understanding you can't choose emotion, and that to be able to learn how to tune into yourself, what's happening for me, and then to be able to learn to verbalize it,
Yeah.
and which is part of the processing, and then releasing it from our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey, because the better you get at this, which one of the tools that we have is the core motion wheel, which helps you. It helps you to tune in. It helps you to slow down, and it's like an exercise. We I think most of us understand the pros of exercise, whether
Yeah.
you are a serious gym person, or you
Yeah.
simply do maybe some kind of video at home, or you just get out and go for a run or a walk. We all know that our bodies need to be exercised, and the core motion wheel is an exercise of the part of your brain that
Mm-hmm.
houses emotion, and it tunes us in daily. It tunes us in, and so it's like when you get there, then you realize there's deeper benefits, there's deeper levels that we're really trying to get to. And there's not you can't put it on speed dial. You can't, as in, you can't force it. You can't hurry it. It's kind of this thing that happens where the more I tune in, the more things I find,
Yeah.
and the more things that I'm able to get to the depth. You can think of it as a well that needs to be completely dried to get to all of that, get that all out. Or I think of a flower garden where you're pulling weeds, and you can break off a weed, but it's going to grow back. So it looks good for a while, but you got to get to the actual root, the very deep bottom of that root, and pull that out. And with emotions, we have that journey. We start this journey, and then we find ourselves getting deeper into it and finding those things that really we're able to pull the weed, the root, the complete root of it out. And so love that about connection codes. And I think that's why I love it when Glenn always says, wow, I'm just so fascinated by you, and learning things. And we've been together a really long time. We've been married 40 years, and almost next week it'll be 41 years. And we were together 4 years before that. So
Wow.
the majority of our lives we've been together, and he's still learning things about me, but it's because I'm learning things about me. And it's through these tools that are really simple tools, which is so great.
Yeah, that's great. Glenn, can we talk about one of my favorite things that we've talked about before? This idea of choosing joy, that we kind of mentioned it a little bit, that we don't choose our emotions, they happen to us. So can we choose joy over fear, or what is kind of the science of what happens to us when we experience an emotion?
Yeah, and I'm not even going to fight with anybody about whether or not they can quote unquote choose joy. The problem is I don't want them to, because if they're feeling pain, they need to process the pain, and quote unquote choosing joy does not make the pain go away. It just ignores it, suppresses it, denies it, whatever. So it's still there. Phyllis was a phenomenal case study of choosing joy for literally decades. That did not make all the other emotions go away. But we thought, culture thought that it did.
Mm.
So the problem is, but because it's the equivalent of, Bridget walks in and she has a broken leg. And I'm like, Bridget, look at your arms. Look how great your arms are. I mean, there is nothing wrong with your arms. And look at your hair. I mean, you have beautiful hair.
Thank you.
Let's focus on this beautiful hair. And Bridget's like, well, my leg's broken. I'm like, why
Yeah.
are you choosing pain? Why are you choosing to focus on the pain, the negative? And Bridget's like, I'm not choosing to focus on this. My leg hurts because it has a broken bone in it. And that's what we're doing. I mean, that's a very almost exact parallel to what's happening in the brain, is that we're just ignoring all this other part. And it doesn't matter if Bridget's arms are doing great. It doesn't matter if Bridget's nose isn't broken. Her leg is broken. So we have to deal with that. And what's amazing is, and that's part of what is such a thrill for me, is this actually gets you to joy much quicker, much
Absolutely.
and more thoroughly, more authentically, if you do process. And the research shows that humans only experience a core emotion for 19 seconds, unless it's reactivated. And what we're doing, we're constantly reactivating the emotion by resisting it, by trying to ignore it. And so now we're literally drowning in the emotion, but we think that we're supposed to be choosing joy, so we just ignore it. And it's heartbreaking. I know, Bridget, you sit with people like that they have been, quote unquote, choosing joy for years and years and years, and they're crushed and they're devastated, and they've never had the safe space to weep and to say, I'm dying. I am hurting so much, especially in our faith-based communities, because they thought they weren't supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
And then they finally have an opportunity to sit with someone like you who's safe for them. And then the authentic, vulnerable self comes out. But that was supposed to be happening every day, every minute, their whole life. They've just been hidden, which is, again, just so heartbreaking.
Yeah. I feel like that's been a really scary process for me, in coming from a faith system, a culture system, a family system, where you just kind of figure it out by yourself. And so this idea of being, and I try, we talk about, being authentic in the moment as well. Like, yes, we want to use our tool of the core emotion wheel on a daily basis, but we want to be sharing what's happening with us right in the moment so that we process. And that still feels scary to me most days, where I go, ooh, and then there's there's some shame attached of, I wish that I could just do it by myself. But again, I was taught that. I don't actually believe that to be true. I believe that we do this in partnership, but my body still carries that narrative from a really long time of being told, if you were smart enough, faithful enough, emotionally mature enough, like, you would just get to some place where this doesn't bother you anymore. And I think changing that language now with myself and people that I work with is, hey, like, this experience might never stop being painful.
Right.
That's not for me to decide. That's not for you to decide. The goal is that we would be the kindest person to ourselves when we're sharing that it's a painful experience for us, whether that's 4 times or whether that's 4,000 times. And that's different for everybody too. I think that's the crazy thing of our brains, is like, we might experience the same painful event and you only need to process it for 30 seconds. And I'm over here with my story and I'm like, oh, I need to have a conversation about that 10 times because the experience was so painful. So can we talk about that for a little bit? When we have, specifically when you're either with your romantic partner or friends or family, people that you spend a lot of time with, where you're experiencing maybe the same moment together, and it feels like you're missing each other because what one person is experiencing feels really big and the other person, it wasn't a big deal. What's happening in that situation?
Yeah. Phyllis and I had this moment this morning. We were just talking, and I don't remember what it was, but she would just talked about experiencing pain in that, and I was just intrigued. I said, "Wait, you feel pain in that? That's what happens for you?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Wow." I said, "I am unable to feel pain in that. I just don't. It's not that I'm not trying to feel pain. I just don't." And she's not trying to feel pain about it. She just feels it. That's what's happening. So, and that's part of what's been so mesmerizing in the last few years for us, is discovering each other. And we already knew it, but now we embrace it. The fact that we are so different. Phyllis feels fear about things that I am unable to feel fear about.
Yeah.
Case in point is Phyllis is a misophobe. She is terrified of mice. I'm unable to feel fear about mice. I just don't. And again, it's not that I've evolved and took a course in how not to feel fear about mice. I just don't. That's just what's happening. No, I feel fear about stepping on cracks, which Phyllis is unable to feel fear about that. Phyllis is like,
Yeah.
wait, what? So let me try to feel the fear that you feel. She's unable to. It's impossible for her to feel fear of stepping on cracks. And it's impossible for me not to feel fear about stepping on cracks. So we're just that different. And now, the last few years of our lives, we just we celebrate each other. We're fascinated. She's intrigued by me. In this fascinating science experiment she lives with, and vice versa. I just am watching her. I'm observing, going, so that's what happens for that particular lab rat, that particular science experiment. That's how things play out for her, which is very different than what plays out for me.
I think about that in the couples that we work with where, and recently we've just been around these people a lot where one of them is very, what we would call social, and the other one actually has social anxiety. And it's interesting because so often in these scenarios, part of their story is that they didn't know this about each other before they married.
Yep.
And it came out after, and then it's almost like the longer they've been together, the more kind of pronounced it is. And so what's fascinating with that is that it can be very painful and almost like, how do we navigate that? Because the one person is wanting to, have friends over, and the other is like, I don't want to have people over, or, they react in such a strong way about the idea of having people over or going out with friends, kind of that plays out as well. And, I think in our society, we can label that. Well, she's an extrovert. He's an introvert. You just kind of give it a label and then you just accept it. Or it is a source of tension always, like one of them that wants to have people over, the other one doesn't. It's just a conflict. It's a fight. And you kind of learn to compromise, like, well, okay, so we can't have people over weekly, but at least once a month we're going to do this. And, there's this constant tension there. And judgment. Often it's a judgment, like, what's your problem? You should be hospitable. Even, if you're faith-based, the Bible talks about being hospitable. So then there's judgment on the person who has social anxiety. But if you can actually get to the root of the emotion behind it, and you can make space for each other, like the one feels a lot of joy about being around people. And maybe with that person, they also feel a lot of loneliness when they're not around people. For the person who deals with social anxiety, they feel a lot of fear around people. And if you can get to that part of the core emotion of what's happening for you, and then you can share it and process it with each other without judgment, you can make space for what the other person experiences, then it doesn't cause a disconnect in your relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean that it just goes away and that now all of a sudden the person who does have social anxiety, it's not like they're like, wow, now that I processed the fear, I'm over it, and let's have everyone over every night of the week. That's not the story, but it's the idea is, I want to understand you. I want you to understand yourself. I want you to be able to process so you're not being flooded by these emotions. And that in making space for each other, you can also figure out what is the need. So you can hear each other's need in it. And that is where you actually get to a place where you are able to stay connected, even though you're experiencing things very, very differently.
Yeah. And there's no quota, there's no statute of limitations.
Right.
And that's so important to understand the brain chemistry, that these emotions are just firing in the brain. And we do this all the time. I mean, I'm a marriage therapist, and I know marriage therapists that's, when one partner has an affair and they say, okay, we're going to set a deadline, so you're going to struggle with this, be mad about it for the next, pick a number, 2 months, the next 3 months, next 6 months. And then we're just going to have to move on past this. That is not human. And we do not, and a lot of the connection codes the research came from watching children, watching babies. and realizing we don't do that with a baby. We don't say to a baby, you've already been sad 3 times today. That's it. You've reached your quota. We're not doing sad anymore today. That's absurd. The baby's going to feel sad as many times as the baby feels sad. That's it. That's exactly the number that, and people say, oh, that individual's too emotional. No, that person is exactly emotional. Now, they may not handle their behavior very well. We're not responsible for our emotions. We are responsible for our behavior. And the problem is people are trying to just modify the behavior, and they never process the emotion that's pushing the behavior. And so we're trying to treat symptoms, which we're a culture of symptom management. That's what we do all the time, instead of actually finding out what's behind, because human behavior is pushed by emotion. And so there's all these bad emotions that we're observing going, stop it, stop it, stop it. And so the person just, bites that on a stick and says, okay, I can grit through this. I'll white knuckle it and I'll stop the behavior. Yeah, but let's find out what's pushing the behavior, because nobody wants to be a failure. Nobody wants to live unsuccessfully. So people are making bad decisions, poor behavior, because of the unprocessed emotion that pushes them in a direction that they should never go and would never go, except that their limbic system is flooded. Therefore, their cortexes don't engage, and they operate as dumber versions of themselves, which is the story of my life. I'm a very talented, brilliant person, but when my limbic system is flooded, I look like a moron, and I can barely function in my day. And then again, that's the reason we're so passionate about the connection codes, because this has changed my life. I'm 61 years old. I want people to, I got a grip on this in my early 50s. I want people to get a grip on this when they're 12, 15 or 18, or, long, long, long before I do, which annoys me with people like you, Bridget, because you're so much younger and you get this at a much, much, much younger age than I did, which I'm actually happy for you, but it's also a little bit annoying.
And we get to process that together, because I think that's the really cool part of, I love everything about connection codes. I could say it all day long, but the reality of two people having two different experiences, and the fact that emotions are so complex. So like, even taking that example, right? I feel joy that I have the opportunity in my 20s to understand emotions and to show up authentically in relationships. At the same breath, I experience tons of pain and loneliness in navigating friendships and dating relationships from the beginning, with situations and people that don't have the same understanding and background. Yeah. And so it's the both and. And so I think, even kind of what you talked about is just in that setting with kind of what can happen in counseling settings is this, like, well, we're just not going to talk about it anymore. And sure, you can go ahead and have that, but who wants to be in a relationship where you're walking on eggshells all the time, and the only reason it's okay is because there's just certain things we don't talk about? And how much safety that there is in friendships and in relationships. And this connection codes are for all relationships. Like, we can use it in marriage, we can use it in dating, we can use it with your kids, the person that makes your coffee. You can use it with whoever. Like, this is the human condition, that how we connect. So I want to talk a little bit about what does it look like for us to be a safe person when someone shares an emotion with us, when someone brings something to us that maybe even causes pain for us, right? Glenn, if Phyllis comes to you and says, hey, babe, like, I feel hurt by something you said today, or I have fear sharing this emotion with you, how do you handle that situation?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to mention, just because you referenced it, the second decade of our marriage, everybody thought we had a great marriage because we learned not to touch trigger topics. And we had been counseled in that, well, you just have to learn to steer clear of this and this and this. So we had a long list of things, and we had several babies by then. So we're busy with children, with work, with the house. And so we just didn't talk anymore about anything of depth. And so we actually looked like we had a good marriage, because people would say, well, Phyllis and Glenn don't fight. Well, that's because we don't ever talk. Not really talk. We don't really share. So it's just fascinating that's the mentality, is just stay away from all these trigger topics, and then you'll have a good marriage. No, you'll just live like roommates. You'll live parallel, which is what we did. But sadly enough, in our settings, in our church groups, we looked like we had a good relationship. We just didn't actually fight, because we didn't really connect at all.
Yeah.
Wow. So now, answer the question.
Well, now I've forgotten the question, because
the question was, when someone shares an emotion with you, how do we be safe people to help them process that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love that in just the tools of the connection codes where, we call it kind of the three things where we teach how to be an audible listener, which means you give an audible response of, we call it the ooh, but really that's just a title. So
Yeah.
you're responding by going, oh yeah, just something audible,
Mm,
and then asking the question, so what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
And when you feel like someone is sharing and they kind of get to a place of stopping, but there's more, to be able to go, so what else is happening?
mm,
And then the phrase, I missed it, which is not an acknowledgement of
Mm-hmm.
wrong. It's an
Correct.
acknowledgement, ooh, I really missed it with you, or I
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand this was happening for you.
yeah.
So I'm
I'm
missing
missing it.
what's
Yeah.
happening for you.
Mm,
And it creates which I love the science even behind that an audible response tickles the pleasure center of the
Yeah.
other person's brain, where
Mm-hmm.
silence, you can be staring, you can be all in, but
Yep.
your silence actually tickles the pain center of the
Mm-hmm.
other person's brain. And so to understand that, to be like safe for someone, they need you to be an audible
mm,
listener. So they know, okay, they're listening. I'm being heard. And also in the being heard category means that your response is just making space for what they're going through. You're
yeah.
not supposed to fix it. You're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to give advice. You're not
Mm,
supposed to kind of say the things, oh, but you're such a great person, which is that
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to reassure
mm,
them,
Yeah.
like, oh, you shouldn't feel fear. You got this. You're great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that actually just triggers, or it just
yeah.
re-engages that emotion that
Yeah.
they're experiencing. It doesn't allow them to release it from their
Mm,
bodies. So it's some pretty basic tools that we need to understand, and we need to understand the science behind it,
Mm-hmm.
because I think if we understood the science, it's kind of like that idea of, oh my word, me staring at you
mm,
blankly, it tickles the pain region of your brain. That is not what I
yeah.
want. I want
Mm-hmm.
for you to
Mm,
know I love you and that I'm listening. Well, you got to be an audible
mm,
listener for that to happen. And a lot of people just don't know that.
yeah.
And so they are triggering constantly the pain center of
Mm-hmm.
the other person's
Yeah.
brain, which means they're not safe, right? That
Yeah.
says, beware. You're not,
Mm,
this is not a safe person. They're always trying to fix you. And
right.
and often when people come to realize that, they're just shocked. Like,
Mm,
I thought I had to fix everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you're coming to me for advice. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, actually, rarely do we
Mm-hmm.
want someone's advice unless we specifically
Ask
say
for
or
it. Yeah.
ask,
yeah.
hey, I need your advice. I'm trying to buy a car and you're the
Mm,
best car person I know. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's asking for
mm.
advice. But when we're just sharing our emotions so often, we're not trying to
Mm-hmm.
get someone's advice.
Yeah, we really have to stress that people don't do that from a bad intention.
No.
Mm-hmm.
People are
Mm-mm.
genuinely trying to help. They want to
Yeah.
help whoever, their spouse, their child, their neighbor, their mom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not from a bad intention. We're not judging the intention at
Mm-hmm.
all. It's just a bad application
Mm-hmm.
because people have to process. And the power of this, if they process through the emotion, if they clear out the limbic system, their cortex is engaged. So
Yeah.
if I can ooh Phyllis for 30 seconds, she gets smarter. She'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. She's incredibly gifted and talented and smart and all that stuff. So, but when her limbic system she is flooded, she just operates dumber. Again, not
Mm-hmm.
because she's dumb, but because she's human. That's how humans
Yeah.
operate. So it's actually better for me not to try to fix it, not to
Mm-hmm.
try to give her advice, not to try to quote unquote help her. The way that I help her is to help her clear out her limbic system. So we call that following the energy. And we say you
Mm-hmm.
follow the energy till the end. You don't know what the end is, but you can feel it when you get there. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and Phyllis mentioned that as far as me just going, oh, okay, babe, so what else happens for you there?
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to process through that so fast, so proficiently,
Yep.
and then she'll get to the point where her cortexes are engaging, and then all of a sudden she'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I know what to do there, and then is processed through.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of that, and that's part of what you're referencing, Bridget, is, the problem is that Glenn gets offended that Phyllis felt hurt by
Mm-hmm.
what I said.
Yeah.
And that's the power of the ooh, is just for me to buy myself some time. And by time, I mean 10
Mm-hmm.
seconds for me to just go, oh, wow. Okay. That was 4 different oohs there. So babe, what happened? What did I miss there? And she's going to tell me, that's not an indictment of Glenn. That's not an accusation of Glenn. That's just what happened for Phyllis. And she was not trying to feel pain. She was not trying to feel hurt. She just did. And so now I have an option. I can say to her, well, babe, stop it. Stop feeling hurt by what I said. And by the way, shut up about it. Well, we haven't accomplished anything except disconnected us even more. Whereas if I can follow her energy, be present with her. And again, the fact that the brain only will hold an emotion for 19 seconds if it's not reactivated. Anybody can do 19 seconds, for goodness sake. I thought it was going to be an hour and a half. And when this research first came out, I'm just like, whoa, that's amazing. And to realize that she just needs 19 seconds of my presence, of my safety, of me following her energy. And 19 seconds later, we've actually connected through the emotion, through the hurt that she felt from me. We're actually closer together because of that, which is just stunning to me.
Yeah, I think especially that place of like how it strengthens connection. I think about like this week I've just been processing in my own story, like a boundaryless person, meaning someone who doesn't have boundaries is not going to communicate what's happening for them or where their pain points are or whatever. Like it doesn't create a safe friend. Like I want to know that someone's going to communicate what they need. And if not, because there's already a disconnection, right? So if I don't communicate to you that it's really painful, even let's like, this is the example that came to mind. I love giving people hugs. I'm very much a hugger. I love to give people hugs when I meet them. For someone, that might be a really big pain point for them, and they don't want to be hugged on a first meeting, right? So instead of keeping someone at distance, being able to communicate of like, oh, nice to meet you. I'm not ready for a hug yet. Is there going to be a little bit of an awkward moment of like, ooh, okay. But if that's what that person needs to create safety, I want to know that. And like, even if on the outside, I am the person that loves to give hugs, like I want to know that this person feels safe to be their authentic self and to grow as that goes. And so for me, that's just been, I think even about, maybe that's kind of a small example, but when I found connection codes, I was in a season of deep pain. Like I was in overwhelming, flooding pain all day, every day for months on end. And my best friend was in a season of deep joy, like deep joy, deep celebration, had a lot of great things happening. And at first it was kind of like, well, how do we do this? Because I feel like I have to be inauthentic to process because I'm in so much pain. And she felt like, well, I feel guilt for sharing my joy with you. And so we had that conversation. And that moment changed our whole friendship, where I got to even take a deep breath and go, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to celebrate your joy because I don't have to tiptoe around. And she was so like committed to sitting with me in my pain. That we were no longer like, I guess you use the term dancing, like we learned to dance with each other, that even though our life circumstances were very different and my outside circumstances were flooding with pain and her outside circumstances were flooding with joy, we were able to partner with each other in that season. And we have stayed that way in different seasons as it's kind of changed, where we're probably in a season where I'm kind of more in the joy space more regularly and she's more in the pain space. But because we have that safety, we're able to communicate that every day to each other when we're processing of, I hear you, even if it's just a little text message. I think that's a really cool thing too, is this doesn't always have to be, even if it's just a 30-second conversation, it can be as simple as I'm getting ready to walk into a podcast recording. I'm feeling some fear. And I just send that real quick. And again, it might just be a thumbs up or a heart emoji or something, but it still does that same thing in our brain of someone's with me, I feel partnered with. And when I feel partnered with, I can be my authentic self.
Yeah.
Wow.
So good and so powerful and so true. I think if we understand that you are, because I think there is a ton of confusion about emotion. People use it as weapons. They also, I think that we live in our emotion or through or something. Like people have these terms that make it seem really complicated, but your goal is to tune in, to understand emotion. They're not good or bad, right or wrong. It's what's firing in your brain. They're messengers. There are guides. and to tune into that, and then to be able to say it out loud, which is part of the processing. And even through a text message, it's like you're saying it out loud,
Yeah.
and then releasing it from your body. Like that
Mhm.
is the goal. We're
Yeah.
not wanting people to drown and be paralyzed in fear. That is not the goal. And when you think, if you're faith-based and you believe that God created us, then you go,
Mhm.
okay, God put emotion, a region in our
Mm.
brain full of
Yeah.
emotion. Like that,
Mhm.
that was his design,
Yeah.
not to curse us,
Mhm.
but to gift us. It's a message center for us to tune in, to figure out what is happening with me, to be
Yeah.
able to communicate authentically, and then to be able to, in that, release it from our body. So we're not drowning in it. We're not,
Mm.
stuck in it. We're not even, sometimes I think even people get confused. Like they'll say, well, I just feel so much anger all the time. Well, often that is secondary anger. Like you got to
Yeah.
understand, well, what's under
Right.
that anger?
Right.
And that, people hold it so much, and then they blow up, show
Mm.
anger, and people go, wow, that was anger issue there. Well, they're holding, see, and your body can only
Mm.
hold so long, or it starts to tear down your body, like
Mm.
physically tear down your body, which you kind of have shared some of that
Mhm.
as part of your journey, is realizing, wow, I've got to tune in because
Yep.
Mm.
of what it does to my body. And that is, our bodies keep the score. And if we're not releasing the emotion, if we're not tuning in, if we're not kind of going, okay, what's happening with me? What's happening with
Mhm.
me? And
Mm.
it'll come out somewhere.
Yeah.
And it may be through gut issues. It may be through
Mhm.
skin issues. It
Mm.
may be, who knows,
Mhm.
other more serious
Mhm.
issues can happen because we're
Yeah.
holding on,
Mm.
which I know for me, I was taught that. Like I didn't realize I was holding on. I was just
Mm.
like, I don't do emotion. So of course my
Yeah.
body's
Yeah.
storing it because I'm not processing
Mhm.
any of it. I'm not even aware of it. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know I had emotion. So eventually my
Wow.
body was tired, and my body said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not holding this anymore. And so
Mm.
things started to shut down in my body, and that got my attention.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it was during a time when Glenn was doing all this research, because he then kind of suggested the emotion side. And I was shocked because I thought, no, 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 I need to go to the emergency room, and I need to get some, a prescription and a shot or something to help
Mm.
me in the pain and what my body's going through. And I didn't realize that it was because I wasn't tuning in to the emotion. And once
Mm.
I did, my body was so
Mm.
relieved, and it
Mhm.
let and then I all of a sudden, all those crazy things that was happening to my body completely
Yeah.
calmed down,
Yeah.
and then I was sold. I'm like,
Mhm.
wow,
Yeah.
I need to learn about emotion, because that was a crazy experience and a crazy time in my life.
Absolutely.
And it was I think often we confuse it. And so we think that it's against God, kind of like, well,
Mhm.
if I learn about emotion, then I'm no longer trusting God, instead of
Mhm.
realizing actually God and emotion are the same. Like he
Mhm.
put them in as his messengers to us,
Mhm.
and we need to be paying
Yeah,
attention.
because the equivalent of that is saying, I'm going to outgrow oxygen. I'm going to
Mhm.
just learn to trust God. I'm just going to
Mm,
walk with the Lord
Yeah.
every day, be filled with the Spirit. And so
Mhm.
oxygen will be a thing of the past. That's not true.
Yeah.
mm,
That's not possible. Humans do not function that way. I'm going to get rid of blood. I'm just going to trust God. I'm not going to have any more blood in my
mm,
body. Well, you can't. That's not an option. I mean, I'm not, because I don't believe in faith, not because I don't want you to have faith.
mm.
Mhm.
It's just not a thing.
Wow.
That's not the human condition. And the human condition is emotion. Phyllis has started saying recently, which I just love, that emotions are text messages from God. That
I
God
love that.
designed our body to tune in, to just send us a
Mhm.
message,
Yeah.
tap us on the shoulder,
Yeah.
and for us to figure out what the message is, instead of resisting it, instead of saying, I'm blocking that number, I'm not going to read that text message. Instead, just go, huh? And it's just curiosity, but
Yeah.
with ourselves as
Right.
individuals and with
Mhm.
our relationships, just curiosity to be able to go, huh? And that's the
Mm,
three phrases, so what's happening there? What am I missing with yourself? To go, what am I missing with myself? What am I
mm,
missing? I felt something. I feel it. I felt something in my body. What just happened for me?
mm,
Oh, I feel some
Mm.
shame
mm,
about that. And again, we just tune into ourselves and we recognize it. We process it. what's the message of shame, and so we tune into that.
Mm.
And we do this in 15 seconds. A lot of times people are like, I don't have time to do that. It's going to take me an extra hour and a half a day. You don't have time
Mm-mm.
not to do it,
Yeah.
because these unprocessed emotions are strangling you.
Mm.
And research shows that people are operating about a 36% capacity on average. 36%. That's a pretty crappy. That's about a third of what you're capable of.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
remarkable.
I've realized we've kind of immediately jumped into the deep end, which of course I
Love
know,
it.
Bridget, it's because of your already just our relationship and also just your knowledge of the connection codes. But if you're listening and you're going, oh, wow, okay, where's this all coming from, or what in the world? Just to kind of know that we, through our own journey and through the pain that we've come through in learning all these things, we knew we had to get this out. We had to get it out in a way that people could understand it. So we wrote a book, which you can get on Amazon. But then we also went kind of beyond that and went into a studio and filmed master classes on all of this. And so I just want to make sure your audience knows there's ways to find this and
Absolutely.
get more of this. But specifically, we've talked a lot about and have mentioned the core emotion wheel. So we have a way for your listeners to
Yay.
go to our website, connectioncodes.co/Bridget, and they'll get the free download of the core emotion wheel and the instructions and a video teaching you how to use the wheel. And it actually gives you a demonstration of the wheel being used. And then if you are interested in our master classes, we wanted to give you and your
Yay.
audience 20% off.
Wow. Thank you.
Get them started. And by putting in RYL20, they will get that 20% off. And it's an incredible journey to start. And I love that, if people are listening to your podcast, they're hearing this multiple times and multiple ways as you share your journey and your heart. And I love that so much because it has played out in your life. Like, you're not just a podcast person who's interviewing us and you don't really know anything about it. This is actually a huge part of your story and
Absolutely.
and where you've been. So
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, I encourage every listener 100%, exactly 100%, go download the core emotion wheel. It's free. Use it exactly the way we teach it. A tool is a powerful tool until it's used as a weapon. A hammer is a great tool, but it can be a weapon. So we really encourage you, challenge you, use it exactly the way we say. But go ahead and download it. It doesn't cost you anything, literally, financially, or even effort-wise. Just try this, and you'll be startled at what it does for you. And that's how people become connection coders, because they dip their toe in the water and they're like, "Dang, that's how we became connection coders," because we're just observing this stuff, going, "Wait a minute, really?" And then we found out, yes, really, it really does work. It really is that powerful. So we just encourage everybody to do that today.
Yes. Well, thank you for those gifts. Friends, that's a great deal. You're not going to want to miss it. In the show notes, we'll have all the information for you to connect with Connection Codes and Dr. Glenn and Phyllis. Their podcast is incredible. There also is an episode where I was able to be their guest, which is really fun. We've talked a lot about the Foundations Masterclass, which is where you'll have the in-depth understanding of everything we introduced today. And then there are 2 other masterclass that I always love to share, which is your late night masterclass. That's all about understanding healthy sexuality and deepening connection in your sexual relationship. And then there's also one for parenting, to navigate what does it look like to teach these tools to children to strengthen your families. So all of those resources are going to be a great way to connect. Feel free to just keep growing on the journey. And again, so glad that you guys are here. Love you so much. So excited to be on this connection code journey with you. And thank you for hanging out with us today on the podcast.
Thank you, Bridget. So fun.
Bye, guys. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Bye.